It was in 480 BC when King Leonidas of Sparta and his mere 300 men faced King Xerxes I of Persia at the narrow gateway of Thermopylae in Greece. This wasn't simply a fight, it was a sacrifice whose reverberations would be felt throughout eternity. In the year 480 BC, the Persians reigned as a superpower under King Xerxes I, who ruled over areas that stretched from India to Egypt. He was determined to exact revenge for his father's forces having been defeated in the Battle of Marathon by Greece in 490 BC. Throughout the empire, armies were recruited from diverse ethnicities: Persians, Medes, Egyptians, among others. Among these were the famed Immortals, which were highly trained and precise warriors. It was said that there were millions of warriors in these armies, but recent estimates have placed them between 100,000 to 200,000 men. Xerxes constructed giant floating bridges over the Hellespont in 480 BC to connect the Asian side with the European side to enter Greece. This was not only an impressive feat of engineering, but also represented the strength of the Persians. On the other hand, the Greek civilization was fragmented, with each city-state operating independently and sometimes even being at war with one another. Yet, when the time came, they joined hands against the invaders. This place was chosen as Thermopylae, a narrow path by the coast in 480 BC, where the presence of mountains and the ocean made the path difficult to access. The leader selected for this mission was King Leonidas of Sparta. Rather than assembling thousands of soldiers, he selected 300 brave Spartan warriors who were trained since birth in warfare. The Greek forces occupied their position in the narrow pass at Thermopylae, Greece, in 480 BC. The terrain became their biggest asset. Surrounded by towering mountains on one side and the sea from the other side, the battlefield had confined any invading army to such a narrow passage. Leonidas I, king of Sparta, did not just lead his 300 Spartan warriors, but also thousands of allied Greek soldiers from Thespiae and Thebes. These forces helped fortify an existing defensive wall along the narrow pass in preparation for an attack from the Persians. However, upon arrival of King Xerxes of Persia and his huge military force, they could not help but marvel at the Greeks who waited there. Xerxes assumed that the Greeks would be scared by their military force and run away. However, he took several days before launching an attack on the Greek forces. The reason why he delayed the attack is because the Persian scouts noticed that the Spartans were training, brushing their hair, and preparing for battle as usual. Eventually, Xerxes had to send someone to ask for their surrender. Leonidas answered, "If you want them, come and get them." It was an incredible show of defiance by the Greeks that left the Persians in shock. At last, with no more options left, Xerxes decided to let his army loose in the pass. Thermopylae, Greece, 480 BC. The wait was finally over as King Xerxes I of Persia, at the age of 38, ordered the charge. Believing that his vast forces were sufficient enough for victory, Xerxes threw his army against the pass. However, the terrain made all the difference. The very heart of the Spartan defense was led by none other than King Leonidas I of Sparta and his force of 300 Spartans. They used their shield and spear to form the formidable phalanx formation. As the Persians charged, they found themselves confined within the pass. Numbers meant nothing here. Just a few of them could fight at a time. The initial engagement was catastrophic. The Persians, wearing lighter armor, were repelled by the more heavily armed Greeks. Spartan spears stabbed through flesh, shields crashed against enemy bodies, and the formation remained intact. Behind the foremost row of warriors, Spartans took turns entering and leaving the battle to maintain energy levels. Xerxes observed the massive casualties his soldiers sustained. With no choice left, he dispatched his best troops, known as the Immortals. They consisted of the most elite fighters who were trained to fight and were feared all over the Persian Empire. But even they could not make a difference. With the help of discipline on the part of the Greeks, their superiority was nullified by the pass. The Greeks advanced in synchronized waves, pressing the Persians backward repeatedly until the end of day one. The battlefield was covered with dead bodies. Thermopylae, Greece, 408 BC. Day 2 of the battle commenced. Despite the enormous casualties sustained during the first day of fighting, King Xerxes of Persia was unwilling to give up the fight. He instructed that attacks continue at the first light of dawn. The Persian army once again marched into the narrow gap. In the forefront stood King Leonidas of Sparta, along with the 300 Spartans and other Greeks allied with them. Fighting never stopped. Time after time, Persians sent waves of their foot soldiers, who were repelled by the Greeks' organized defensive efforts. The terrain kept restraining Xerxes' huge army from doing its full potential. Numbers did not matter on such tight space. Leonidas adjusted himself to the situation, ordering his soldiers to advance and retreat skillfully in order to lure his enemy further and attack them with accuracy. Greeks kept their rotating system. They always had fresh troops at the front line. Even the highly regarded Immortals were unable to succeed. Their efforts to breach the Greek line resulted in massive casualties. Frustration grew among the Persians as they continued to be unsuccessful in their attacks. Xerxes, from his vantage point, was witnessing the events of the battle. The predicted rapid success was now turning out to be a prolonged struggle. But as the Greeks continued to fight, an element of surprise was being prepared far away from the battlefield. And then, everything changed. At Thermopylae in Greece in 480 BC, during the course of the battle at the narrow pass, a mere act of betrayal would prove decisive for the outcome of the battle. The local Greek Ephialtes, motivated by sheer greed and prospects of rewards, walked into the Persian camp one evening. In his possession was information that would turn the tables on the Greeks, an unknown mountain trail that bypassed the Greeks' defenses. This route, known only to the locals, snaked its way around the hills overlooking Thermopylae. The secret was divulged to the Persian king, Xerxes I, by Ephialtes. Sensing the chance, he did not waste any time. Instead, he picked an army of the best soldiers, including the Immortals, and asked them to take the secret route during the night. Following the lead of Ephialtes, the Persian army started its climb up the mountains in silence. On the other side, the Spartan king, Leonidas I, along with his troops, was still oblivious to the developments. However, deep in the mountains, things were beginning to shift. As the Persians moved down the treacherous path, they came across a few Greeks guarding the passage. However, since they were taken by surprise, the Greeks tried to fight back but were swiftly defeated. Now that the way was clear, the Persians would soon be on the other side of the Greek soldiers by morning. When dawn broke at the Battle of Thermopylae, Greece in 480 BC, there was a sight that would break anyone's heart. King Leonidas of Sparta had been informed about the movement of the Persians via the secret trail through the mountains. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans and some 100 of their allies were now faced with the very real threat of being encircled. Their mission was simple: defend the pass no matter what, thus giving Greece time to ready itself against the Persian attack. The Persian forces were now marching toward them from both fronts. Leonidas inspired his soldiers. "Men of Sparta, recall why you are fighting. Our bravery shall live forever." His words echoed across the field, firm and authoritative. The narrow pass now became a killing field for the few surviving troops. The Spartans took up their battle formation as the Persians launched an attack from two fronts. Lances hit shields. Warriors' war cries could be heard all across the rocky terrain. Dust and blood filled the air. One group of Persians was followed by another who charged at the Spartan army. But even the mighty Immortals were not able to make headway immediately. Leonidas led his men into battle with lances and shields ready, cloak flowing in the breeze, eyes burning with the spirit of determination. With the rising of the sun, the number of Spartans began to dwindle, each Spartan falling proudly with honor intact. Eventually, the hero fell, but not before being encircled by his fellow men. The death of Leonidas, nonetheless, provided sufficient time for the Greeks to ready themselves for their impending battle against the Persians on their soil. The Battle of Thermopylae was ultimately an example of a brave last stand in which one must face almost certain death. Thermopylae, Greece, 480 BCE. The battle scene at Thermopylae was quiet. It was filled with dead soldiers from Sparta, other allied Greek soldiers, and numerous Persian soldiers. The price of valor was extremely high. King Xerxes I of Persia emerged triumphant on the battlefield. He had finally won against the defending force with his large number of troops. However, he had paid a hefty price for the win. It was not a failure, but a triumph for the heroic death of King Leonidas of Sparta, along with his 300 men. It gave the Greek city-states enough time to get ready for the war against the Persians. Thermopylae made the citizens feel the urgency and brought them together against their enemies. There were monuments raised in honor of the heroes at Thermopylae. Leonidas's bravery and leadership lived on forever. He is remembered through legends, songs, and written history. Despite being a tactical defeat, the battle was actually a strategic win for Greece. Thermopylae showed that courage, discipline, and proper use of the landscape can overcome any large army. The lessons learned from this event were applied later in other victorious battles, such as Salamis and Plataea, which assured the continuity of Greek culture. Thermopylae is a reminder that there is nothing impossible in this world if you fight with bravery. The name of King Leonidas became immortal in history, literature, and pop culture. The battlefield itself is now associated with honor, devotion, and human endurance.